Welcome to the Hangar Deck Podcast. We bring amazing aviation talk and interviews for the aviation enthusiast. You are listening to www.thehangarddeck.com with host Pitchlock Pete and the Hangar Deck crew. This show is brought to you by Leading Edge Aviation Consultants. Pre-flight is complete and the crew is strapping in. Stand by for Pitchlock Pete and the Hangar Deck team at the Hangar Deck Podcast. Welcome to this episode of the Hangar Deck Podcast.
All right. Welcome back. It's good to be back. It's been a long time coming. And let's get through this transition music here. All right. Transition music sounds pretty good, even after 4 months taking off. Back in studio, it's the Hangar Deck Podcast coming at you all the way from Southern Maryland. And it's got some real good stuff for you tonight. But before we get into it, it's, you check your calendar. It's the 75th anniversary of D-Day. It's amazing. I got to watch a little bit of the president today deliver the address from Normandy. That was quite riveting. We're going to talk a little bit more about that today. Last episode was, let me see here. I've got my episodes up. 105, we got to talk to the Geico Skytypers, and that was a great episode for those guys. We're on Stitcher Radio, iTunes, Google Play, Twitter, Facebook, and now YouTube because I'm cutting video right now as we do this interview. So we'll have that YouTube video up later today. And, it was a great couple of months off from podcasting, but we didn't take off completely because we had Whitey and one of our new guys that has been working with us for the last couple of months. We're going to introduce Mr. Sean Sims tonight. Sean's written a couple of articles. You can go find it on our website. Let me point that out to you if you're on video. It's our www.thehangarddeck.com, and I've got our articles up. Sean did a great article on the Boeing P-26 P shooter fighter. And he's also done a really remarkable story on the XP-5Y or the R3Y Tradewind flying boat, and maybe Sean will give us a few minutes before we talk to our guest tonight about how he came up with the research on that story. But what a great story from Sean. So without any further ado, I want to introduce Sean. Sean, how you doing? Welcome on your first podcast with the Hangar Deck.
Pete, I'm doing fantastic. Super excited to be here. I'm very happy that I got hooked up with the crew here. It's not only my first podcast interview here with the Hangar Deck, but my first podcast ever. So this is fantastic.
It's good stuff. Technology, man. We can, you're all the way out of Pittsburgh. I'm here in Maryland, but we can connect. We'll have to get you up on the Skype thing so people can see who you look like. But because we haven't released all those photos you took recently. Now, Sean reached out, and we'd reached out to Sean about writing the articles, but lo and behold, Sean is a amateur photographer. So, we sent Sean and Andy down to Warbirds Over the Beach. You want to tell us a few minutes about your experience down there, Sean?
Yeah, it was my first time down there, and that show is amazing, spectacular. I've been to tons of air shows throughout my life. Started with my dad when I was young, and that's where I got my aviation bug. But there's something special down there at the Military Aviation Museum. It's a great experience. I got a great collection down there, and the people are fantastic too.
What we broke the story. You wanna mention that story for our listeners?
Yeah, the fan of the podcast, the infamous TK, told Whitey and I, hey, come on over to the Fighter Factory at a specific time on Friday, and he didn't tell us what was going on, and we get there, and this tractor trailer shows up, and it's their brand new P-39, and it was the Hangar Deck crew and the Fighter Factory guys. We're the only ones on site to see them unbox that from all the way from New Zealand. It was great.
Well, Sean, Yeah, I know you can't see it right now, but on our screen here on our recording for YouTube, I've got that picture on our website. If you go to our website and check out the photo shoot, Warbirds Over the Beach 2019, you've got Andy and yourself are standing right in front of the P-39 fuselage, and what a beautiful restoration the New Zealand crew does, don't they?
Yeah, those guys did fantastic work. Three of the crew were there on site to start the reassembly as soon as it came out of the back of the truck. And from what I hear, they had it fully assembled by Wednesday after the show. About what, 4 or 5 days. So
Yeah,
great work to them.
4 or 5 days they were turning engines on that airplane. That's a remarkable restoration, and they do such a great job. But there's another crew that's doing a really, really awesome job, and we've got one of the leads there, Jason Capra, all the way coming from us from I believe it's Pittsburgh, but working on this restoration of a C-53 called Beach City Baby. Welcome to the show, Jason.
Hey, Pete, this is Jason. Thanks for having me. It's a real honor to be here today.
Nah, the honor's all ours, Jason. It's an amazing story that you guys got going on. But before we get into that story, you and Sean know each other, right?
we do. We actually went to high school with each other.
It's such a small world. I said to these guys on the pre-show notes is like, Sean told me you guys went to high school together, and I'm going, wow. There must be a lot of Warbird fanatics up there in the Pittsburgh area.
I'll tell you what, we were really lucky. We had a lot of really good, down-to-earth, just genuine people that Sean and I grew up with. And our little high school that we went to, known as McGuffey High School, I always said it was kind of like the last staple of hope sometimes. Just everybody seemingly got along, and we all knew each other and looked out for each other. And people still had a lot of work ethic and pride in what they did growing up in that little town. And I think that's what's transpired to carry Sean and I through with our personal lives and careers is just, nobody owes you anything in this world. You got to work for it. And that's a lesson that was taught to both of us at a young age growing up where we did. And I think it's carried us through very well. Awesome.
I couldn't have said it any better myself. A good work ethic, and it's carrying over to what both of you are doing. So I've done a lot of research since Sean has told me about your project. It's no new news in the Warbird community what you guys are doing. But before we get into the details of Beach City Baby, how about can you give me a few minutes? And I know Sean, you can't ask this question because you already know what he does and who he is. Tell our audience a little bit about yourself, Jason.
Sure. Yeah, my pleasure. I've been really fortunate to be around airplanes most of my life. I actually didn't grow up in an aviation family. Nobody in my family flies or was an active pilot by the time I came along. But my grandfather was, I think, pretty instrumental in getting me interested in World War II aviation at a pretty young age. I actually have a picture of me when I was like 2 in my crib with a P-38 Lightning hanging above my crib. So I think from day one, I've been staring at Warbirds, and that's kind of all I've ever really cared about or wanted to be involved with. But I started flying when I was a teenager. I was 15 years old when I took my first flight lesson and learned how to fly right at the little county airport by my house where I grew up, which was less than 2 miles down the road. Did my private pilot in a J3 Cub. There's no other way better to learn how to fly than flying tailwheel. And I still have a soft spot in my heart for that Cub. It's a great airplane. But I learned, got all my ratings while I was in high school and paid for every hour of instruction by myself. I remember I took my first orientation flight, and afterwards, I think it was for my 15th birthday, I told my dad, I said, I want to learn how to fly. And he said, well, that's great. We don't have the money to do that, but you got 2 options. Either you can wait to be in the military and do it, or you can go get a job and pay for it yourself. And waiting another 3 years to go and enlist or do something in the military it was too long. So I went and got a job.
It's not cutting the cheese. You're not waiting 3 years to get in the air.
No.
I can appreciate that.
Yeah, I wanted to fly in the worst way. So I went up to the airport, and the company that let me do my orientation flight, I talked them into giving me a job cutting grass and cleaning airplanes in the evening. And I told them that I wanted to learn how to fly. So all the money I made, they put in an account for me at the airport, and that went towards my flight lessons. But yeah, I paid for every hour of instruction by myself from the time I was a sophomore in high school to the time I was a freshman in college.
Work hard. If you work hard, anything is achievable. Anything.
Yep, absolutely.
I truly believe that.
Yep.
So what are you doing nowadays?
Well, I'm professionally, I'm an airline pilot. I've been a captain with Republic Airlines, which is a regional airline affiliated with American Airlines. I've been there for 13 years now, and I'm based in Pittsburgh, which is great. And as many of the airline folks out there know, that commuting can completely change this job. So I've been really fortunate enough to be able to drive to work for the last 13 years.
Nice.
Other than that, I was really fortunate from a young age as well to get involved with a really good group known as the Berlin Airlift Historical Foundation. I'm sure you guys have probably seen their Berlin Airlift C-54 out on the air show circuit from time to time. But,
Absolutely.
I actually,
yep, I have.
Yeah. Tim Chope, the guy who runs that organization, is a very good friend of mine and kind of was a mentor to me growing up. And Tim gave me a chance to get involved with that organization. And Tim's actually from my hometown. And we kind of grew up knowing each other. And Tim's much older than I am, but we had kind of the same background and same stories. And he just gave me an opportunity at a young age to get involved. And when I got my multi-engine rating, I think I was 19 years old. And I had been a member, just a volunteer helping out, cleaning the C-54. You know, every time it would come back from an air show, I'd be there wiping grease off of it and oil and anything I could do to get involved. And I remember telling Tim, I said, I got my multi-engine today. And he goes, good. He goes, because I need a co-pilot. So my 11th hour of logged multi-engine time was in the right seat of the C-54.
What?
DC-4, learning how to fly it. Yeah, I'm really lucky.
Are you carrying a 4-leaf clover around?
I'm telling you, man, you can't make this stuff up. I completely thank God every day for every opportunity that I've had come my way.
Yeah.
But again, it was the right place, right time. I'd been working my butt off for Tim, just doing whatever needed to be done on the airplane for years. And I never expected to get to fly it. And lo and behold.
Yeah, usually that small network of people that get to pilot a Warbird, whether it's the ones you were flying or even if you step up into the single-seat fighter aircraft of World War II, those are a pretty elite group of people. And now you're one of them. Look at that, Jason. That's pretty awesome.
Well, I'll tell you, anybody in my family or friend group that's known me for a long time would tell you if Jason had his choice between flying Warbirds for a living and being an airline pilot, it would be flying Warbirds for a living. That's where my heart and passion is. And I'm very fortunate that I have the job that I do, which financially allows me to pursue what I've done with Beach City Baby. And I'm hoping one day that I can make that a full-time job, restoring aircraft and working on them and displaying them for people and just use the airlines for travel.
That's pretty good. That's pretty awesome. Hey, Sean, you guys must be drinking the same Kool-Aid up there, you know. you sound very familiar. You're very well spoken. Well, what do you think, Sean? What's the first thing we want to know about this airplane?
I think I'd like to hear the backstory. I mean, I've read a little bit about it, but how did you and Beach City Baby get hooked up? I mean, that story to me is the most intriguing out of this whole thing.
Oh, and by the way, if you're watching or you're listening to us, go look at this interview on YouTube because I've got the video of that first flight running in the background right now, Jason.
Oh, boy. Okay. Awesome. Well, I'll tell you, Sean and Pete, it was pure dumb luck, as most of this stuff goes sometimes. And so I was driving back from a ground school recurrent yearly class that I have to do for my airline job. And, being on the interstate, going out and coming back, it's pretty monotonous sometimes. So I always kind of like getting myself lost on some back roads in Ohio and West Virginia and just seeing what I can find because this area is always good for barn finds and stuff laying in a field somewhere. But I started making my way back to Pittsburgh, taking all these back roads through Ohio, and I came around the bend and I saw this nice little grass strip. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. This neat little airport in the middle of nowhere. And like, there's got to be some cool airplanes parked here. And man, I came around the bend, and lo and behold, there's this ghostly looking white DC-3 sitting there. And I almost ran into the telephone pole, turning my head backwards, trying to look at this thing as I'm driving by it. And I pulled off the road and walked over to this thing, and it didn't look like it had moved in the better part of a quarter of a century. And just the windows were all delaminated, and there was bird droppings all over it, and the paint was peeling off of it, and the fabric was all hanging from the flight controls, and tires were getting flat. And God, my heart just broke looking at it. And I don't know. I guess anybody who's been around warbirds or these old airplanes, we always say these things have a soul, and it's like they're alive. And I'd be lying to you if I said I didn't have an immediate connection with that airplane. And it was almost like it looked at me and said, I need you to help me. And I was like, I'm going to do something to save this plane. I can't let this thing sit here. I got to find out who owns it. So I went on a 2-week phone directory search for the Akron, Ohio area, trying to find this gentleman's name. And I went on the FAA's website and pulled up the N number of the airplane, and I was able to find his name that way. And I just started calling every Ken Joseph in the phone book until I got a hold of him.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, you're going to think I'm crazy, but I saw your airplane, and I told him that, I've got some time in a DC-3, and I actively fly a DC-4. And I really would like to come out and take a look at it and just get to learn a little bit of the history of it. And so he agreed to that, and he didn't know much about the wartime history of it. And he let me, go in the airplane. I was able to write the serial number down and stuff, and really kind of start digging into the history of the aircraft. And I found out that it was a combat veteran and a active Army Air Corps aircraft starting in January of 42, which is right at the beginning of the war. And I'm like, how is this thing sitting in this field neglected and nobody knows about it, or no one's doing anything about it? And I'm like, I got to do something. So I told him, I said, I want to buy the airplane. And if you give me a chance to do that, I'm going to save it, and we're going to make it look the way it did when it was brand new. And I hope to be able to take it on tour and do air shows with it and give this airplane the retirement that it deserves and tell its story. And after about a couple of weeks, he agreed to sell it to me. And the stipulation was, though, I obviously didn't have the exact amount of change lying around that he asked for it.
That was the next question I had to come in my mind is, how do you go about, before we get into that, hey, on this video, I'm rolling in about 7 minutes. And are you standing up talking? Is that you in the YouTube video that's currently up?
I'll tell you what, do I have a green polo shirt on?
Yeah, C-53 with a baseball cap on.
That is me. Yep.
Okay, that's you. All right. Now I know what you look like. Okay. But anyway, how do you come up with cash enough to buy a DC-3?
Well, so the stipulation that was given to me was, and it was $100,000 was the cost of the airplane as was, and that came with not only the airplane but 2 spare engines, one that was a parts engine, and the other one that is serviceable and can be used. And I thought for the 2 engines alone in the airplane and the engines that were on there, I'm like, this is a pretty good deal for $100,000. There's a ton of work that needs to be done, but this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I've been dreaming about something like this. What the hell? Let's do it, And so I asked him, I said, well, what's it going to take to hold the airplane for a year? And he said, I'll take $20,000 as a down payment. So I went home and made a long, hard decision, and I emptied my savings account. I took everything I had at the time, and I put it down on the airplane. And I said, all right, well, this is all I have, and here we go. Let's do this. And he goes, all right, you got 1 year to come up with your remaining $80,000. And if you don't have it by this date, a year from now, I keep the airplane and I keep your $20,000.
Wow. And, that's a gamble.
That was the deal. And I obviously didn't have anything formed yet, and I said, okay, well, dealing with Tim Chope and working with his organization, I called Tim and said, Tim, I just put money down on a DC-3. It doesn't fly, and I need to come up with the remaining balance in a year. And he chuckled and said, oh my God, okay. And I said, well, look, you did it with a C-54 and a C-97. I said, what can you help me out here? And what do I need to do to get this set up? So Tim was kind enough to walk me through the process of starting my own 501c3 nonprofit and my own air museum. And took me about 2.5, 3 months to get all the paperwork set up, which again worried me because that's 2 to 3 months out of this year that I had. To raise money, but that's how long it took for everything to come together. And in about 3 months, we had Vintage Wings Inc. was formed, which is again a 501c3 nonprofit historical foundation. And with the paperwork in hand, it was good to go as far as asking for donations. And man, I hit the trail hard. I asked every individual I could think of who was remotely interested in airplanes and history buffs, and went down to Sun and Fun and introduced myself and tried to tell people what I was doing. And it wasn't a whole lot of corporations willing to jump on right away, but I did have a couple people, start sending money, and it kind of just took off. And this was right on the heels of That's All Brother.
That restoration was going on too, right?
Yeah, and this is, right at the same time. And there was a lot of interest in what was going on, and I said, I became friends with Marino from the That's All Brother, and he's now actually spearheading the DAX over Normandy and D-Day squadron stuff.
Yeah. I met Mo a couple of years ago. We interviewed Mo, and then he invited us to the Atlanta Warbird weekend for the 75th anniversary of the Tuskegee Airmen. I follow him on Facebook, and Mo, he's on. This is day 18 on his diary.
Yes.
Yeah, I read Mo's post this morning. There was a frustration piece that he wouldn't let out, but what an experience those guys are having over there. And that's why I said to Sean, I'm like, let's just, instead of talking to you, let's interview you on D-Day, the 75th anniversary of D-Day, of somebody that's restoring a piece of history, of World War II history. And that's what I'm all about.
Absolutely.
So what did Mo do for you?
Well, Mo just, I had met Mo once or twice before, but he was introduced to me by Matt Jolly, who's another good guy in the warbird industry, who I've become pretty good friends with. And after talking with Mo, I said, look, I know what you guys, how successful you were with raising money with That's All Brother. I'm not asking you to help me out. I just need some pointers and ideas of what's a good idea to do. And we ended up, I set up a PayPal donation link and then a GoFundMe account before it really got abused by a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. And it was relentlessly every day, every few hours, just annoying the ever-loving God out of everybody I could think of to help me with this airplane.
Yeah.
And telling the story and what we're trying to do. And we really we started a Facebook page and got people interested that way. And every week and month that went by, we had more and more people following us on Facebook and more people sending us money and wanting to help out. And by the grace of God, Pete, with about a month left to go, we raised the remaining $80,000.
Wow.
So I walked up and handed Mr. Joseph a check for $80,000 cash. And I financially owned the airplane the day that I signed for it. We didn't have any debt. We didn't have any loans out on it. It was just paid for in hard cash by a lot of work.
Well, that's awesome, Jason. If you're listening, Jason Capra, the owner of Beach City Baby and Vintage Wings, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back at the Hangar Deck Podcast.
Aviators Hotline has been bringing buyers and sellers together for 39 years. The aviation community has come to rely on them to assist in the buying and selling of single, twin, and turboprop aircraft, as well as parts and services. Published monthly in print and digital format, Aviators Hotline is positioned to be your true marketing solution with multimedia options. Visit aviatorshotline.com or aircraftforsale.com for more information.
We're back at the hangar deck, taking a short break for our friends at Aviator Hotline Magazine. They've done great stuff for us. If you haven't seen their online magazine, go check it out, Aviator Hotline. All right, we're back talking with Jason Capra and Sean from the hangar deck, and boy, dude, I've been rolling YouTube videos on this page, just watching your first flight, your first engine starts. I'm intrigued. I'm just really intrigued. Congratulations on owning the airplane. What are your thoughts there, Sean? Can you use your connection, your high school connection, and get me on board?
I'm sure we can get you a personal tour if you head up to Pittsburgh, Pete. I think I can extend that out, but you're going to have to ask for flight time with Jason once the aircraft's ready to get back in the air.
Yeah. Well, let's. Can we talk about timeline, Jason? This first flight took when was this?
So our first flight in Beach City Baby was this past October. So October 6th, 2018 was the first time the airplane left the ground in almost 26 years.
It's amazing. Yeah, and you did it on a grass runway too, what it's originally designed to take off from, right?
Exactly. Yeah. The interesting thing about it was once the airplane was paid for, my God, did we have our work cut out for us. And, we did a pretty thorough inspection of the aircraft and its structural integrity and its systems. And I can promise you, Pete, that absolutely nothing on this airplane worked.
It looked, the one video I saw was you guys just inspecting and cleaning, and I saw the throttle quadrant, and what went through my mind is I have a P3 throttle quadrant here in the house that I'm trying to rebuild or just kind of make it as a showpiece. But I looked at the throttle quadrant and I said, "Wow, how did you get that? And all the cables and all the pulleys and everything. I mean, that there is a chore in itself, right?"
Oh yeah, I mean everything on a DC-3 is cables and pulleys. That's it's as simple but as antiquated, and it works. And as complicated as a big airplane like that looks, the one great thing about the aircraft that's made it last the 80-some years that it's been around. I mean, there's still over 150 that are, I think, airworthy around the world. And that includes the turbo conversions as well as the radial engine aircraft. Is its durability, but its simpleness in its design. And McDonnell Douglas or Donald Douglas, I should say, when he designed the aircraft and the engineers designed the aircraft, I mean, they only had so much to work with, but they wanted it to be serviceable and they wanted it to be easy to work on, easy to maintain, but still do its job. And, they've said time and time again, and I've heard many operators say this, that the only replacement for a DC-3 is another DC-3.
That's got to be a true statement, right?
Yeah, it's simple, it's rugged. There's so much redundancy on it, but it's straightforward. And I tell people all the time, I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but if a idiot like me can work on it and understand what it's doing, then there's hope for the rest of us. But again, it's very different than a DC-4. I was really fortunate to get to work on a DC-4. There's a lot of similarities with the systems, but it's still a different airplane. And there was a lot of stuff that I didn't know, and some of our team members didn't know going into this. And then it was just a matter of getting all of the manuals and sitting down and reading them. And, after you read it once or twice, you're like, well, that sounds pretty good. Then you go out to the airplane, look at it, and it's like, wow, that's actually pretty straightforward. And you just do it. And, the way I looked at it was the airplane was maintained and operated by 18, 19-year-olds in combat in the worst conditions you could possibly imagine. And in the year 2019, with all the resources and technology that we have, there's no excuse for a bunch of 20 and 30-year-olds to not be able to do the same thing those guys did.
Yeah, with the right skill set. And I saw we just rolled through one of your pictures on the third video we looked at. Your staff there, oh my gosh, there was like 15, 20 people standing around taking that shot. How many people do you have at any weekend working on the plane?
It varies. I'd say on a good weekend, there's probably anywhere from 10 to 15 people in the hangar working, and they have all kinds of different backgrounds, a lot of aviation backgrounds. And then there are other times there's just one or two of us in there, during the week when everybody else is working. But we're really fortunate. We have about 6 or 7 A&P mechanics. 2 or 3 of those guys are retired. We have 2 IAs, and then a couple of gentlemen that have some really, really good round engine and tailwheel experience mechanically. And just a lot of guys that aren't afraid to do much of anything. We've got people that have been fabricators their whole life, and sheet metal guys and welders, and all of that combined really just kind of gives you the tool set and the skill set that those guys had back there 60, 70 years ago. And there's, nothing that we feel that we can't do or procure or make, which is great. And then I've really built my relationship with the Stolfusses, who own Preferred Air Parts. And that has been just one huge blessing, because they actually convert DC-3s from radial engine aircraft to turboprop aircraft. And they have a plethora of airplanes sitting out there at their hangar. But not only do they have all the spare parts that we need, and they work with us on getting what we want and what we need when we need it, they've been so helpful with letting us just come out to the shop when we have questions and literally walk us through on a brand new DC-3 that's being built in their hangar, what we have to do to ours, what not to do, what to do, don't do this, try this. And we learned that the hard way so that you can take advantage of that. And it's been instrumental.
That's great. Sharing information, within the community is critical, important. Lessons learned. I mean, you guys are going into this with no restoration experience, other than a passion for the airplane. And I'm just, hats off to you. This is incredible. I'd love to be a part of it. If you lived closer, I'd be spending my time out there on the weekend, really making my wife upset. But, there are 2 DC-3s here in St. Mary's County that are flying around with PT6 turboprop conversions. And, it makes a different sound, so you can definitely tell. But when you see the silhouette of the DC-3, it really, if you're an aviation buff, you know the history and the background of the airplanes. And like I said, the D-Day squadron's over there right now. What a better time to talk about, this airplane than at the hangar deck on the 75th anniversary of D-Day. So, Sean, you better hurry up, because I'm going to keep on dominating this conversation. I've got some questions, but Sean's definitely chomping at the bit. Go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, no, we touched on it a little bit earlier in the conversation. We talked about the restoration effort and everything. But Jason, what can you tell us about the history of your aircraft? I mean, I've done my own research, but go ahead and tell the listeners here about your plane.
Awesome. Yeah, I'd be happy to, Sean. Well, the airplane was being built actually as a DC-3 in late 41. And it was sitting on the factory floor in Santa Monica when we were attacked at Pearl Harbor. And immediately afterwards, like most everything that was being built at that time, was immediately pushed into military service. So the airplane became redesignated as a Douglas C-53DO Delta Oscar Sky Trooper. And the DO basically just signifies that the aircraft was built in Santa Monica, California. It was accepted by the Army Air Corps in January of 1942. And its first assignment, which was a very brief one, it was assigned to the 12th Air Force Command at Bowling Field in Washington, D.C., which is, as Pete knows, being from that area, right across the river from Washington National Airport right now.
Oh, yeah. And
I believe that's where they keep the Marine helicopters and aircraft for the presidential squadron over there as well. I see them always going in and out of there when I'm going in and out of National Airport. But that was his first assignment with the 12th Air Force. And this was right around the time, right before Jimmy Doolittle got to go over and take part in the infamous Doolittle raid, which was in April of 42. Now, ironically, Jimmy Doolittle, when he came back from that, was awarded the command of the 12th Air Force, which is what our aircraft at the time belonged to. So, we're still trying to speculate and prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that Jimmy Doolittle actually flew in our airplane. Again, until I actually have paper that says it with a picture, it's just hearsay, and I don't want to, elaborate on that without having the actual proof. But
Go with it. Go with it.
Yeah.
Come on.
pretty good shot there. But
I
yeah, so
think Bob
shortly after-
Bob Hope must have flown in that airplane also.
well, that's funny because I'll get to that in a second.
Oh.
But, so what's really cool with the airplane is, as they started pumping out C-47s and stuff, the airplane was transferred to the Air Transport Command since it was more so set up as a C-53. And for those of the listeners who really don't know the difference between a C-53 and a C-47, the easiest way to tell is the door, the main cabin door. So your C-47 has the big clamshell cargo doors that open up, and obviously it's a cargo aircraft. It has a reinforced floor in it that can take the beating of putting cargo on and off the airplane, and it has a reinforced landing gear that kind of give it some extra strength on the landings. C-53 is a true DC-3 in camouflage. So they never had the big cargo door. It always had the small passenger door, and it always had the small baggage compartment on the left side of the aircraft's fuselage. And that is the easiest way to tell a C-53 from a C-47. But because of that, the airplane was quickly pushed into service with the Air Transport Command and found its way up into Presque Isle, Maine, where it was assigned to the North Atlantic Wing of the Ferry Command at the time, which eventually became ATC. And so this was one of the cooler stories we actually found through a lot of research, and a gentleman that I became friends with from Iceland, who is a fanatic Air Transport Command fan and Ferry Command fan. He actually provided me with tower logs and pictures from early 1942 from Reykjavik Airport in Iceland.
Wow.
And sure enough, there's our serial number, 120041200095. And next to it says ATC, and then it says Northeast Airlines, which was also pretty interesting. And and then there was a picture of it that was kind of far away, but you could see some of the markings on it, and it definitely had some unique markings for a military aircraft. And when I got the work orders back from Douglas for that 10 ship series, 41-20090 through 41-20099, only one of those aircraft was flown by civilian pilots for Northeast Airlines, and that was 095, our airplane. And
I've got a picture of if you Google search your airplane or just C-53, DO 41-20095 comes up on in a graphic with everything you're talking about right now, Beach City Baby, with the Northeast Airlines on the side of it, Jason. So great commentary as we're following along for our listeners to see the difference between the two types. But
awesome. Well, yeah. And the interesting thing about that was all the pictures of that airplane, the 5 is gone. There is no 5 on the tail. And even in one of the books I have, that airplane is depicted in there, and it says serial number 090. And when I went to the original Douglas orders and looked at that serial number aircraft 090, that airplane was actually assigned to the South Caribbean wing of the Air Transport Command and was flown by Pan American crews. So there's no way that was it. And what we found out happened was at some point when the airplane was transferred to the North Atlantic wing, they put de-icing boots on the aircraft. And when they did that, they did some skin work, and the 5 was accidentally removed from the vertical stabilizer and was never painted back on. So the assumption that it was just 90 was there, even though that wasn't it. It was actually our airplane.
Wow, I see the de-icing boot on the leading edge of the rudder, and in this graphic. Were you a part of this graphic? How did this thing get recreated?
So that's actually the one with the Northeast Airlines.
Yeah. The side shot.
Yeah, those are all. So there's an actual graphic that somebody came up with, and that was from 2 different sources that had books on the DC-3 and C-47s and C-53s. The actual photos of the airplane are actually from the National Archives in Washington, D.C. One of my vice presidents, Tim Nelson, every time he goes down there for work, spends hours sitting in the U.S. archives digging through files and folders looking for pictures of our airplane.
Wow.
And the other photo that we have of it is actually from the Delta Airlines Museum in Atlanta, Georgia. Northeast was merged with Delta Airlines, I think in the 60s, if memory serves me correct. But they have a little bit of information on it, and that picture was actually on their website, one of them. And I was like, "You got to be kidding me! There's our plane," you know. So that was pretty cool.
Right. No, it's fascinating. It's fascinating, and you know, we're looking at. I'm staring at That's All Brother from the CAF, and you know, are you a member of the CAF or considering becoming a member of the CAF after the restoration?
I am not. I'm not a member. I never have been. I think what they're doing is absolutely fantastic. You know, I actually did donate money to That's All Brother when that project started. I thought it was such a cool story. But I never joined. Unfortunately for us, and Sean will testify, you know, we don't unfortunately have a very big aviation presence in Western Pennsylvania.
Right.
We don't have a CAF wing that's anywhere even near us. So, you know, growing up and reading magazines and stuff, it was the CAF was always the backbone of the Warbird movement, and I would have given my left arm to be a part of it.
You and me both.
But we just didn't, we just didn't have anywhere to go to do it. And, you know, when you're 16, 17, 18 years old, and no matter how badly you want to be a part of it, you know, you're not going to drive 2 days or a day as a 16-year-old kid to go do that, let alone have your parents' permission to take the car.
Right.
So I just made the luck that I had at the airport by my house. And luckily for me, like I said, Tim was there with the C-54, and I ended up, you know, all I ever wanted to do was fly fighters, P-51s, P-40s. And I'll never forget Tim Chope telling me, he said, "You're going to be a cargo guy before this is all said and done." And I'll be darned if he didn't convert me. So,
yeah. Well, it's a great story. You know, some follow-on questions, and I know we're already running at 50 minutes, and I can probably talk to you for like 2 hours, easy 2 hours. So, Jason, would you come back on our show?
I would love to. It would be an honor for me.
All right. Well, we'll get you back on the show again, but we're gonna cut this one out at an hour. But can you? My last question. Sorry, Sean, I got the last one. Can you tell us what your plans are for the paint scheme? Because I know you got a big old PPG, you know, swag on your website. So obviously you've got some connections donated by PPG. Is it painted yet, or what is the plan?
Yeah, so the airplane's actually completely stripped for the most part. It's bare metal right now, and we've been preparing the surface and stuff for paint. Again, I'll keep it real quick, but after the airplane was with ATC, it made its way over to North Africa, which is where it spent the rest of the war, and was heavily involved in Operation Torch, which was the invasion of North Africa and that whole campaign. So the paint scheme that we're going to go with is the Operation Torch paint scheme, which is the round star with no bars on the side, has a yellow ring around it. And if you look at our website at the very top of the homepage, there's a graphic that Chad Hill from Django Studios did for us for our current T-shirt design. But that is the actual paint job that's going on the airplane. It's got the medium green splotching with the olive drab and the gray.
Yeah.
And the British fin flash on the tail, because the operation was under U.S. and British command at that time in late 42, early 43. But our airplane actually took part in that whole operation. And that was really the first campaign of the European theater in World War II. And, you know, I think the D-Day aircraft are amazing, and they tell an important story. Ours never took part in D-Day. It missed D-Day because of a landing accident in May of 44. Otherwise, I'm pretty confident it would have been involved somehow. But our airplane took part in those early uneasy days of 1942 and 43 when no one knew how this thing was going to go. And our pilots were flying aircraft that were built for civilian use in combat until, you know, the Douglases and Boeings and Dauntless, you know, consolidated aircraft companies that got stuff pumped out that was actually meant for the mission at hand. But Ours was just a civilian DC-3 thrown into combat, and she did exactly what Uncle Sam asked her to do, and that was fight for her country. So I want to pay homage to those guys at the very beginning of the war who had no hope, but still went and fought that fight.
Yeah, well said. Well said. You absolutely have a passion for this. Obviously, if there's anybody that can be as passionate about this mission, go out and buy their own DC-3 and then restore it. I don't think there's anybody else other than on their own without an organization behind them. Then that's got to be Jason Capra. So, Jason, thank you very much for coming on the Hangar Deck podcast, and Sean, I gotta say props to you for bringing this story to us. I mean, this is phenomenal. We're gonna have a good relationship with Vintage Wings, I think, Jason, and start promoting Beach City Baby and being a part of your social media campaign. Help you out any way we can.
Well, it's greatly appreciated, and like I said, we can only move as fast as the finances allow. So we always need all the help we can get, and I just hope that people realize that we're doing it for the right reason. Every dollar, Pete, goes towards the airplane. I don't have any salary positions in our organization. I wrote it into the paperwork that it's impossible to do that. And I want to make sure that no one ever takes away from this airplane, that it's always about the airplane.
Well, that's good. Tell us how we can contribute. Tell our listeners how we can contribute to Beach City Baby's success and see it flying again on the circuit, air show circuit. It is a museum. It is a piece of living history. And Sean and I both know that from being down in Pungo, Virginia. And if you ever get a chance to go down there, I mean, that's inspiring on its own. But how can we contribute? How can our fans contribute to Vintage Wings?
Well, the best way to do it is to go to our website, which is www.vintagewingsinc.com.
I've got it up.
I'm sure you got the website up.
Yep.
And at the bottom of the homepage there's a donate button via PayPal. And you can put any donation in there you want. Again, it's tax deductible. So any donation is tax deductible on your income tax return at the end of the year. And again, 100% of that goes to the restoration of the aircraft. It doesn't get funneled elsewhere for other projects. It's 100% to the airplane, every bit of it. And if that's not something that you're interested in, we have different levels of membership. If you do actually want to sign on and be one of our supporting members of the aircraft, and there's different levels for that, corporate-wise and for individuals. And that's on our Join Us page at the top in the menu bar there. And then at the very end of that menu bar, the coolest part is something where you can show off your support for our project. We have a shop tab. And in our store there, we have about 5 or 6 items right now.
Oh, check out the merch, man. Check this out.
So we have T-shirts, hats, these awesome aluminum pinup signs, panel signs that Chad Hill made for us from Django Studios, decals, all kinds of different things. But again, all the money from that as well, that all goes towards the restoration of the aircraft.
I'm digging your logo, Vintage Wings. It's awesome.
Well, thanks, Pete. We appreciate it.
Nice design, man. This is great. This is awesome. Yeah, I love merch. I love World War II merch. So, yeah, I got all kinds of stuff. I you know what I have to do, Sean, is give people a tour of the studio to check it out. I got a prop down here, a PT-17 prop with its big old wooden thing, sitting in here, but this looks great. This looks awesome. So, all right, go out and check them out. Vintage Wings. There's plenty of people that have interviewed Jason. I don't think I've heard Jason on a podcast yet, but he's been on YouTube. He's been with Warbird Digest. Great article on Warbird Digest with Mo and the crew. Go check that out. But thank you again for coming on, Sean. What do you think? Closing thoughts, Sean.
I think it was fantastic, Jason. We look forward to an update in a couple months. Please let us know when you're ready to come back on the show and share some news with us.
Oh, absolutely. I look forward to it. And if it's okay with Pete and you, I think the next one we'll try and do a live video from the hangar. And I'll give you a walk around tour of the airplane and highlighting some of the stuff that we've done on it.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, and I'll plan to meet you up at the hangar there for that one. That
would
great.
be perfect. That would be perfect.
All right. For the hangar deck, I got to say, once again, thanks a lot, Jason, for coming on, telling your story. And, you can check this out and all our episodes at www.thehangardeck.com. We've got, of course, it's D-Day's 75th anniversary. We've got a whole bunch of World War II interviews, including some guys that have been there. Sergeant Norman Thomas Jr., 101st Airborne, was at the beach, jumped out of one of these airplanes. Go check out that interview on www.thehangardeck.com. All right. So for me at the hangar deck, and for our new hangar deck, our new hangar deck guy, welcome, Sean. Welcome. There'll be much more on this topic. So thanks a lot, Jason. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys. Have a good night.